Once in a while, designers encounter the need to download all of the assets from a Webflow project to their local system so that they can actually manipulate them or upload them to another project or image optimize them as WebPs or even just to store them for backups. Now, if you've designed the project yourself, you may well have the original assets and media safely tucked away on a network attached storage or stored in the cloud. But if you've inherited the project or if you did not have the foresight to save those originals somewhere in a nicely organized fashion, you're going to run into the situation where the only place those images exist on record is in this assets panel. And the problem with that is that Webflow does not offer any way to bulk download these images, and you can have a lot of them. So we're going to do an experiment. We're going to look at a way to download those images using some kind of deeply technical halfway to Hackerville techniques. We're going to use Chrome Dev Tools to get the images we need, and we're going to look at the URLs, and we're going to look at downloading and creating an entire list of all of the assets and then downloading them all. We're going to look at all those different aspects. The tools that I'm going to use to do this today in this experiment are going to be obviously the Webflow Designer, Chrome. I'm on Windows right now, but any Chrome browser and Chrome Dev Tools, that is my preferred environment for taking apart and debugging web pages. It's very powerful. It's what I would recommend you use here. I'm also going to make use of ChatGPT, and I'm going to use ChatGPT in order to transform some of the files that I get. If you're unfamiliar with ChatGPT as an options, we're actually going to use GPT Plus, which is the paid version. And the reason for that is that we want access to Code Interpreter, which is currently, as of August 2023, is, I believe, only available in the Plus version of ChatGPT. There are many other ways you can do this, but this is partly experimental, and this is partly because it's going to save us a ton of time, and we won't have to write scripts or do massive search and replaces in a developer ID or write regex expressions or anything like that. We just want to take the data that we get and turn it into a list that we can then download. So we're going to try a couple of different ways to do that. We're going to see where we land. If you do have ChatGPT Plus already, or if you decide to get it because you desperately need the ability to download those assets and you want to follow this experimental guide or tutorial in literal fashion, then make sure that you have Code Interpreter enabled when you do this. This Code Interpreter is here. If you have ChatGPT 4 and cannot find it, you will find it under Settings. We'll go into Settings and Beta Features, and you have to turn Code Interpreter on. You may want plugins on as well. It's very useful for other things. ChatGPT is constantly adding new features, but they often come in as disabled by default, and you need to go find them and turn them on. So we'll set that aside for now, and let's have a look at this process and what we're actually trying to do. So right now, this is a fairly small project, and I have not tested this on an extremely large project with this exact tool chain. But we're going to try this tool chain anyway. There are only about 50 images in this demo site, but we want the full-size images anyway. Currently, the only way to do this in Webflow is to download each of the images individually, which means that I can go to an image, I can click in the top right corner, and I can click here to see the URL. And you can see that that opens the full-size image, artwork, whatever it happens to be, whatever size it happens to be, whatever format it happens to be, as it's stored on Webflow's CDN. And this is how it's delivered into your site through a high-performance CDN that generally begins with uploads SSL. There's also there's another variation of this URL as well for whitelisted sites, but the process is more or less the same, and you've got this image here. Now, the same image here has been thumbnailed. It is reduced in size. If I right-click and inspect to open Chrome DevTools, I can look at the HTML of the React application. I can see this image here. And if I open this URL, you can see it's almost the same, but this is a thumbnail. That thumbnail is smaller than the original image, as you can see, and the URL is almost the same, but it is slightly different. And the difference, as you can see here, is this part here, this suffix, this -p -130 by 130 Q80. So this is appended to every thumbnail that I've seen that Webflow generates and displays in the asset panel. And what we want to do is get all of those thumbnail URL images and then remove this where it exists, and then we will have our list of files that we can download, and then we'll look at how do we actually download them all. So that's a very important understanding to have, and that image here, that portion of the string, I have captured and pasted into a document so that it's handy later, and this is part of what ChatGPT's code interpreter is going to help us with, just to make that process a little bit smoother and faster. So let's dive back into the designer and inside of the Chrome DevTools at the same time. Now, one important thing is you want to make your browser full screen because you want the Webflow designer to be functional while your Chrome DevTools are also open. If you don't have enough space, the designer shuts down and you can't interact with it, but you actually need to interact with it to do this process where we're going to capture all the files. So what I'm going to do is in the Chrome DevTools, I'm going to switch to the network tab. Now it may be hidden underneath this little extension tab, but you can actually see mine is here. You can see that it's recording. You can see that it is currently clear. You can also see that it is filtered to images. So if I unfilter this, and if I were to refresh this page, you're going to see every request that the browser makes as it reaches out and goes to download each of these individual files in building the React application. You'll see often a lot of files. You'll see this with any website or application that you go to access. Now, this is still being filtered, so it is only showing images. If I wanted to unfilter that, I'd change it to all, and you'll see it has a lot of different stuff in there. Script files, CSS files, HTML files, other forms of data files, CSS, everything is in there. But what we want is the images, and we only want the images from assets, and we only want these thumbnails that appear here. So the way we're going to capture that is we're going to actually use the network log while we are scrolling through the assets panel to capture everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to clear, I'm going to make sure this is recording, so this will be red as it is now. But I want to clear this. And I want to go ahead and open the assets panel, and then note that I've got it in this tiled view. I'm at the top, and I'm just going to start scrolling down page by page and let all of these images load one page at a time. If you watch on the right hand side of the screen, you can see each of those images is being requested. I'm seeing pings, I'm seeing SVGs, seeing all sort of different things happening. And as I'm scrolling, it is downloading and logging all of those. And I want to make sure I don't scroll too fast because I want to get all of these images. And I'm at the end. Now I want to pause the network log, and that is done by turning off this recording. And now it is gray. And I have everything, and it's not going to be affected now. That is everything that I have downloaded. It's all of my images. Now we want to filter it to images. So we make sure we open that filter panel. We switch it to images. And now we should just see our assets. Basically just our assets, and that is looking pretty close. There may be a few additional little artifacts. You may get little things like these parts of the designer interface, for example. Anything that has been loaded since I popped open the assets panel and started the network logging. So those you'll weed out. You don't want them in your assets, but for now, we've got everything we need here. Now, how do we get it from this list into a list we can work with? And this is where things get interesting. All I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, and there is an ability to copy this content in a number of different formats. You'll see that there's a series of copy as, and then there's copy all as. And this is what we want. And the most convenient format for this purpose is probably going to be this one here. Copy all as curl command. And this is what I'm going to do. So this would actually be a series of download commands, but I've not found a way to make that work by itself by just running it. There are certain curl parameters that it is setting that don't actually exist, but let's go ahead and click that. It'll take a moment to copy it. Now we need to put it somewhere, so we're going to open Notepad or some text editor. We're going to paste it in, and it's going to work because it's a big file, and it's going to take longer if you've got more, but you can see that this is the series of curl commands. We've got a lot. And you can see each of them lists the URL that it wants to download, but it also includes all of the headers, all of the cookies, all of the everything, tons and tons of stuff that's involved in each request. It's describing each request as it was made by the browser. But what we want is just these URLs. So the way we're going to get these URLs is we are going to actually, this is where we're going to use ChatGPT's code interpreter. So we want to save this file somewhere. It needs to be saved so that it can be presented to ChatGPT. Now I've got a temp directory here. I've created a folder. I'm going to call it asset test, and I'm just going to call this curl. Curl.txt. That'll work fine. And then I'm going to go open that file. I can close this down. Can open my folder that I've created. I can see I've got curl.txt right there. I'll move this over to the side. And now we're going to bring in ChatGPT, code interpreter. So code interpreter is enabled, and that means you can see this plus here for uploading a file. If you don't see that, something is not activated right, and you'll want to make certain you've got your settings chosen right. And I can literally drag and drop this over into ChatGPT, and now I can begin telling it what I want to process. So I'm going to say, this file contains a series of curl commands. I want to extract just the URL that curl is downloading. And I'm going to say, just for fun, I'm going to say, let's call it src for source. Create a file which, create a CSV file which contains 2 columns. Column 1 contains source and is titled asset. Column 2 contains a modified version of source and is named, I'm going to call it URL, I'm going to call it download. The modified version removes the text string, I'll put that in a second, from the URL, from the source URL, if it exists. Okay, it was a bit verbose, but I like pushing ChatGPT to see what it will do, and inside my quotes, that is the string I want to remove. So let's see what happens. So what you'll usually, I'll leave the video running because it's interesting to see how Code Interpreter processes this and what happens. So ChatGPT first explains what it is planning to do, how it interpreted your instructions. It basically reads them back to you, and in a more concise way than I probably wrote it. And then it begins its work. It's first trying to get the file, it's trying to process the file, it's trying to extract the images, trying to modify them. And as it's doing, you'll see these work steps. Now you can expand any of these to get an idea of what it has actually done. So it wrote some Python to look for URLs and it's looking for them against the curl command with some white space and then URL. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want, is that URL. Not any URLs in cookies, not any URLs in other headers. I just want that URL of curl, so that's good to see that it understood my prompt correctly. Then you can see what it began to get. Now this is interesting. I see a non-image here, but that's totally fine. I'm not too worried about that. I see some analytics stuff. So it's definitely picking up non-images. I'm seeing some JS stuff. But the main thing I'm seeing here is I actually have the URLs. I actually have the list of URLs that it is getting, and that is exactly what I'm looking for. So now it's creating some lists. It has modified it, has written it to a CSV file, and it has made it possible for me to download it. So let's download this and have a look at what we've got. We're going to put it back into our asset test directory. And this is processed URLs. That looks great. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open that in just in Excel here, just to see what we've got. And you can see I've got two sets of URLs here. One is asset, one is download, two columns. You can see here that all of the images that I'm looking at, here's a ping with the P minus 130, 130, and you can see that it is removed from the modified version. You can also see here's arrow.svg, does not have that resized thumbnail specific descriptor. They're showing the full asset there, and it has left it unmodified. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. I can see all of my images. I can see, as I scan down this list, I can see that I'm getting good data. And it looks like I've gotten everything, because I had only about 50 images in there, but it's clearly picked up all sorts of other things as well, and that is perfect. I want to make certain that it is complete. So let's make an additional modification here. Let's say from the files list, only keep SVG, only keep image files. Let's see what it does. Also recreate the CSV. Also create an HTML file using the download URLs, which is my modified URL. Create a series of image elements in the HTML file, which each use the download URL as the source. And that should create a file where we can see all of the individual images in there, and we'll be able to visually inspect and see if that matches what we're doing. So let's actually just run that and see what happens. And based on past experience, it should do really well. So excellent. It's inventorying its own idea of what our images look like, and it's looking for the image extensions. That's beautiful. It is modifying. It is filtering. I love its ability to sort of explain exactly what it's doing as it goes. It's rewriting the Python. If you've not seen this before, this is probably mind-blowing. I remember the first time I began playing with GPT-4, even at the end of 2022, with the earlier versions of GPT. And since then, its improvements, and particularly its improvements with Code Interpreter and some of the things it can do, it becomes a real functional workplace tool for this kind of thing. I use it for all sorts of things, even manufacturing fake dummy data, like a list of, give me 1,000 hospitals in the Minneapolis area with fake doctors' names and rosters, and then I can load it all into Webflow's CMS as CSV files and get some phenomenal results out of that. It's really fun. I've even gotten it to generate fake images. Not to generate them, but to source them from sources such as Unsplash by manufacturing the URLs. So here we can see we've got our two files. And let's have a look again. We're going to look at our CSV. I'm going to download this one. I'm just going to replace. Don't save that. I'm closing Excel out. There we go. My old version of Excel here. We've got our process. Oh, that's right. It's a new file. That's cool. Processed image URLs. Let's go ahead and open that and see what we get. That looks better to me. Asset and download. I see my 2 columns. And it looks like just image URLs. And I still have more than I expected, which means there may be duplicates. But I am honestly okay with it. I'm not too... it looks like there may be a lot of duplicates. I'm fine with that. That's going to work fine for purposes that we have here. They all do... And so if you notice, I believe... I've not double-checked this, but if you look at the asset URL path, I believe that this is the site ID. And that this is probably a unique asset ID stored somewhere, or it's just a hash that is created to guarantee uniqueness and among uploaded files with the same names, for example. But this is good. This looks like good data. We're going to run with it. Now we're also going to download our HTML file, and we're going to have a look at that. And hopefully this will give us something meaningful. Ha ha ha. This is what I love to see. All right, what we're going to do, let's scan through this very quickly. I'm seeing full-size images and assets that look really good. I'm seeing multiple copies of them as well. So let's actually, let's see if we can tidy that up. I'm going to go ahead. We've actually got what we need. But I'm going to see if I can get it to remove duplicates, because I do suspect there are duplicates. It's been a long time since I've actually used Excel. How do I sort? Data, sort A to Z. Expand the selection. That's right. It doesn't work like... I am seeing duplicates. Look at that. Those are definitely duplicates. I'm seeing, 6 or 7 of the same item. So let's see if we can get it also to remove duplicates. Perfect. But regenerate both files with no duplicates. And we're going to see if it understands what I want. It says it's understood. Never tried this before, actually. We're discovering together in venturing into new territories, but these are simple requests, and it does such a good job of understanding the mechanics of what needs to be done and inferring even sometimes missing details that I've learned to trust ChatGPT-4 with Code Interpreter quite a bit. Always check your results, and that's why we have this HTML file in part, is to allow us to review and compare and make certain that we've gotten all the images that we want. But let's see what's happened here. Here we have our unique images URL. We'll save that. We'll open that. We just want to see if the number has changed. Now they look, are they sorted? They might be sorted. Ah, beautiful, 76. That is a much more reasonable looking number to what I would expect, and I'm still seeing my conversions and translations are looking good. I think we are in great shape. Now I'm going to download this one. Just going to replace it, and we're going to open that, and we should now have all of our media, including all these large versions. I did obviously not format this anyway for an interface, and we should have, this is really good. Now, what I'm going to do actually, just to make this more manageable, because part of what I want to do is to compare this against the assets panel. So I'm now going to say regenerate the HTML file with a CSS grid wrapping the image elements. Make it 4 columns. Each image should be no wider than 25. Well, actually, I don't think I need to do that. The 4 column CSS grid should actually do the trick. So let's see if it will resize the images accordingly. I'm just going to stop with this and see what happens. If I need to constrain the image sizes to 25% of page width or to 25 VW, that can be done as well. But I suspect that's not going to be necessary here. I just want to be able to see them all on the page. It was important, however, for me to see the full-size versions to know that I wasn't getting the thumbnails. I was actually getting the full-size URL versions. So that is mission accomplished. We now want to nail this next piece. And then after that, we only have the final step of downloading it. There are a couple different ways to download it. One way is to write a script that will use the CSV file and use the destination URLs, and then create curl commands or write a Python script, depending on what you're comfortable with at the command line level. You probably have curl installed on your system and it could download them all into a directory. I haven't done it that way. I'm actually going to do it a different way, where I just use the web browser to download all the assets. It's a little bit uglier, but in terms of what you actually get in the directory, but it is functional. Now this is interesting. This will work fine. This will work fine. A lot of similar images that are different. A lot of images that are the same but that are uploaded more than once. You can see little variations, but it looks like it is done exactly what I've asked it to do regarding deduplication of the actual file name paths, even though some of the images were uploaded more than once by the template designer. And that's totally fine here. So we're going to move this out of the way. And what we want to do is have a quick glance between our file here and what we're seeing in the assets. We just want to get a good sense that we do in fact have everything we want. I'm confident that we do, but you would want to do your own translation. Now notice I'm not clicking on anything. I'm only using the mouse wheel so that the windows don't swap positions and then I end up losing my view entirely. But you can see there are lots of different variations of this uploaded and a couple of variations of that uploaded. This one has more height than that one does. There's different things. That's all fine. That's part of the process of web development iteratively, and we now have everything we want. So how do we download these? Well, we could right-click on each of them one at a time and click Save Image As, but we're back to square one in a sense. What I want to do is save the whole thing. So I'm going to right-click, I'm going to Save As, and I'm going to make sure that it's choosing Web Page Complete. There are other options like Single File, which is sort of a web page plus its assets and script files, etc. in a zip kind of arrangement in an archive. There's also just the HTML. We want the assets, so we're going to say give me the whole web page, including everything it tries to access, and I'm going to put this in this same asset test directory. Now there are a lot of assets here, which means it is likely to take a little while. You can see my cursor flickering. You can see that the browser is going and downloading each of those images, and the only indication we have of what's happening is this indication here. Now that's rather annoying. There isn't clearly indication in the mainstream as to when it's done, but if you look in the top right corner, you can see this download in progress is actually indicating exactly what's happening. So we will know when it's complete and when it's received all the assets and done its job. And now I don't want to click on this because it'll just open the HTML page. I actually want to look at the folder. So let's open the folder, and it opened over here. And I can see unique image files, and I have my files. Now the important thing to understand here is we've accomplished our mission. We have downloaded all of the assets in a Webflow project, and we did not have to download every single one of them individually. Yay. Yay us. But there is very likely to be other stuff here that you don't want. There's likely to be script files. There's likely to be CSS files. There's likely to be other things. I'm actually not seeing them. It's actually put them into... I'm not actually seeing a lot of that stuff, which does surprise me a little bit. SVGs, 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 pings. I expected it to be a lot dirtier than this from my previous tests, but this is pretty good. I know why it is. The reason that this is so clean is because we generated an extremely clean HTML file. It contained no scripts and no CSS. it only contained the image references. So when we went to download it, we got the HTML file itself, which you would see here, unique images HTML. And then the files that it downloaded are all only consisting of our asset files. This ended up being a very effective and efficient solution. And I think this is going to be my go-to from now on when I need to download those assets.